Tier 3, Slumbering Weald, Gambling Controversy and Game Corner Removal. In Pokemon games, you battle mainly sets of trainers instead of unique characters. It'll mostly say like Jim the Pokemon fan or Jake the Collector. There's a lot of these trainer classes they're called, and one of them was a bit controversial in the original games, and that was the Gambler Trainer. Over the years, gambling has been looked down upon a lot in games, so the Pokemon Company had to change this. He was changed to Gamer originally, and now the newest name change given to this trainer type is PI, because he kinda looks like a private investigator now. A complete overhaul of design. Luckily, it does look a lot cooler. It's a lot better of a trainer in my opinion. But it's weird that we'll just never see another gambler in a Pokemon game. Lavender Town Syndrome. In the early 2010s, an urban legend claimed that hundreds of Japanese children had committed suicide in the 90s as a result of music in the Red and Blue games, speculating that high-pitched tones only audible to children caused headaches and erratic behavior that led to their deaths. This fabricated illness was dubbed Lavender Town Syndrome, and the original story went viral after a creepypasta version of the story was spread throughout the internet. Obviously, it was completely made up. No one died from hearing the Lavender Town music that I'm playing right now, but it was an insanely massive creepypasta back then, and even now it's one of the most iconic by far. Uri Geller Kadabra Lawsuit. The Pokemon Kadabra was based off a magician named Uri Geller, who could bend a spoon. That was his whole big thing. So this Pokemon, like all original 151, became super popular and ended up getting lots of cards. And this was fine until the Dark Kadabra card came out, which featured a star on Kadabra's head. Yuri took this to be a anti-Semitic remark towards him, stating that it resembled the Waffen SS logo. It obviously wasn't meant to resemble that symbol at all, but he ended up suing and making such a big deal out of it that for 20 years the Pokemon Company didn't make a single Kadabra card. And recently, Uri Geller had apologized and basically said that he didn't care anymore and they could make more cards. So if you look at all the Kadabra Pokemon cards ever made, there is a 20-year gap. So as of September 22nd, 2023, Kadabra cards are now being made again. EVs and IVs. EVs and IVs are stats that pretty drastically change how a Pokemon battles. IVs are the wheel of stats that's predetermined for a Pokemon, while EVs are ones you can train per Pokemon. Pretty much all of competitive Pokemon battling in the game requires you to do some sort of EV training, and if you're really into it, catching the right Pokemon with the best IVs will really help a lot. EV training can be done in a lot of different ways. Different species of Pokemon will raise different EV stats if you defeat them. So say you defeat a Quaxly, you'll get an EV in attack, and if you defeat a Skeleturge, you'll get 3 EVs in special attack. You can also use different things to speed up EV training. Like the Macho Brace will increase the EVs given by a defeated Pokemon, but make your mon a lot slower. And if you somehow have Pokerus on a Pokemon, you'll get more EVs as well. But if you want to train specific EVs without doing lots of battling, you can use vitamin items. These items each just raise a EV for a Pokemon. Bad eggs. This is a bad egg. Looks just like a normal egg, but, well, it has a different name and can't be hatched or normally obtained in any of the games. A bad egg appears when a Pokemon's data gets corrupted. If you've ever modded a Pokemon game, whether it be with something like PK Hex, or even a Game Shark if you played back then, there's a pretty good chance you could corrupt a Pokemon and turn it into a bad egg, which is just kinda useless. There's a lot of ways of fixing a bad egg, like modding your save even more. You can adjust the stats kinda back to a normal range and it'll be okay. But it's a lot of work, and by that point a lot of people just give up and consider that Pokemon a dud. Question mark, question mark, question mark type. This is a weird entry. There is technically a whole type removed from the Pokemon games. The 3 question mark type is a completely neutral typing, meaning it takes normal damage from any move and will do normal damage with any move. Arceus had a 3 question mark type, but aside from that, there's not too many appearances of this typing. The move Curse, when it was introduced in Generation 2, was originally given this question mark type, since it didn't really fit any of the other types. Now it's obviously Ghost, but the only other times it's appeared is in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. There was 4 moves given this typing. Aside from these few appearances though, this type has just vanished. It's been completely removed from the franchise with the Generation 5 games. Bird type. In the original Pokemon games, there were some points where the localization team kinda messed up. Instead of calling the flying type a flying type, sometimes it was called the bird type. What's crazy is that this even made it into the Fire Red and Leaf Green remakes of the games. It was fixed with the Let's Go remakes on the Switch, but technically there's a Pokemon that has the typing of bird. I mean, it's Missing No, so not really a Pokemon, but Missing No did have the typing of bird. Mega Evolution is painful for Pokemon. Mega Evolution is, at least in my my and a lot of other people's opinions, the best gimmick in a Pokemon game. But something that's not too cool is some of the Pokedex entries of these Mega Evolved Pokemon point out that it can be really painful for them. Take Houndoom for example. The Pokedex entry of its Mega Evolved form states, "Its red claws and the tips of its tail are melting from high internal temperatures that are painful to Houndoom itself." So, yeah, obviously not good for the Pokemon. There's some other dex entries of different Pokemon suggesting that this isn't the only Mega Evolution to be painful as well. So it sucks that it does hurt the Pokemon, but a lot of these entries about it being painful were in the Sun and Moon games. I have a feeling they're gonna kind of, in a way, retcon it being painful in the Legend ZA game. Snorlax is based off a real person and named after Kirby in Japanese. When asked in an interview about characters that weren't related to Pokemon, it's kind of weird how many they asked about, the head of Pokemon, Masuda, when asked about Kirby, stated, "It's not a Pokemon, but there is a connection with Kirby you may not expect." An employee at Game Freak, Mr. Koji Nishino, was the inspiration for Snorlax. He was always someone who ate a lot and would go to sleep and kind of resembles Snorlax. He would always be called Kirby as a nickname in the office. Real animals in the Pokemon world. In the Pokemon universe, animals are hardly ever mentioned aside from Pokedex entries, like with Pikachu being the mouse Pokemon. But aside from that, there's hardly any mentions or appearances of real-life animals. It's sort of assumed that Pokemon take the place of these real animals, but there are some exceptions. Like, you can see this dog in an official Pokemon picture book, you can see bees in the animation for attack order, and even in the show it shows a Kabutops hunting what just seems to be a normal fish. Aside from these examples though, there's really not too many times where real animals are ever known to be in the franchise. Pokemon Illustrator card. This is the Pokemon Illustrator card, and we don't know how many of these exist. Well, most cards we don't know the exact amount of copies, but this was a special card awarded to selected winning entries across 3 illustration contests publicized in Koro Koro Comic, and these cards were given out in 1998, so finding one now is pretty hard to say the least. Back when these cards were getting popular for, well, people remembering about them, and they started being sold, the lowest price one was ever bought for was $100,000, and that was a PSA 9 back in 2013. Also back then, it was believed there was only 12 in existence, so it's a very old exclusive card from a contest not many people could win. With current estimates being roughly 41 cards ever officially produced, how much is this card nowadays? Around $5.3 million. Just insane for this card. Venustoise. In episode 20 of the Pokemon anime, Maiden's Peak, at one point a Ghastly merges a Venusaur and Blastoise together. Bit of an insane thing for the show to do since the only other fusion of any Mons was in Black and White with Kyurem, but this sparked a massive interest in possible fusions of Pokemon, and I wouldn't be surprised if this led to the making of Pokemon Infinite Fusion, or at least was a big inspiration. I really don't know why they haven't done any fusing since this or Black and White. It's a really cool feature and clearly a lot of people want it with how big Fusion is. Ash Greninja. This is a very unique Pokemon that's locked to a single game in the show. When Ash got his Froakie in the Pokemon X and Y anime, the Froakie was previously owned by someone who didn't get along with it. So Ash wasn't his first trainer, but Ash developed by far the strongest relationship that Froakie had ever gotten. With this extremely strong bond, a strange bond phenomenon occurred, the only one in the franchise. It was retconned, but we'll get to that. You could obtain this Ash Greninja, it was called in the Pokemon Sun and Moon demo, and it could be transferred to the normal Sun and Moon games. Aside from that though, this Greninja could only turn into this new form in Sun and Moon, meaning it's a normal Greninja in any of the future games you transfer it to. This bond transformation was very similar to Mega Evolutions, and with Legend ZA coming out soon, a lot of people think it's just gonna be a Mega Greninja form, and that the whole bond transformation won't be used again. Ho-Oh made Ash. The Battle Frontier project has started. In the remakes of the Hoenn games, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, there's a sign in front of a miniature model of a building that says the Battle Frontier project has started. The Battle Frontier was a mechanic in Pokemon Emerald that let you fight a lot of NPCs in different formats, and it was a very loved mechanic to say the least. It was by far the biggest part of post-game content that Emerald had. Just a massive part of the game, and when it was hinted at in the remakes, people were a bit confused, as the remakes usually don't get a third game for a remake. They'll normally just have the new content from the third game in both of the remakes, and that's it. So people were a bit annoyed when they found out that this was just an Easter egg. Teasing such an amazing mechanic is kind of really annoying for a game like this. Kanto is a meme in the Pokemon fanbase that's basically just Generation 1 fans going crazy when anything to do with Generation 1 is in a new game or another remake. And I mean, I'm a Generation 1 fan. I grew up on Indigo League and I love the games, but there seriously doesn't need to be any more Kanto content. If there's constant content from the first games, then it's not gonna be as interesting. I mean, I say that and it has been 20 years and people still love the Kanto region, so who knows, maybe we'll get another remake of the Kanto games. I really hope not. Pokemon Gold Space World 97 demo. The Pokemon Gold and Silver Space World 97 demo is an early build of Gold and Silver that was shown at Nintendo Space World of 97. At the time, the final game was estimated to be about 80% complete and was set to be released for the original Game Boy. The Game Boy Color wasn't announced until late March of the following year, but due to a variety of delays, including a complete overhaul to the game, it wouldn't be released until late 1999. During the 2 years after it was shown at Nintendo Space World, it completely changed. There's a list of the Pokemon that were in it, and a lot of these were either completely redesigned, turning into Pokemon we now know, or just completely scrapped. Aside from that though, we unfortunately don't know a whole lot about this original build of the game. We have some screenshots of what morning, day, and night look like, some mini games, we know some of the mons, but unfortunately that's about all we know about it. Gen 4 is slow. The Gen 4 Pokemon games, Diamond and Pearl, are extremely loved. These games got an amazing third game, Platinum, which fixed a lot of the issues, including the ones coming up, but a common complaint with the original two games is that they were slow. Not just because they're an RPG slow, there was a lot of things in the game that were just slow in general. The delay between inputs and actions was slow, the time it took for a mon's health to lower it all was slow, the surf speed. Overall, Diamond and Pearl were very slow games, and Platinum fixed a lot of these issues. Obviously, the issues weren't big enough to cause anyone to like them any less. These games are loved. I mean, they got a remake and a whole Legends game in the past few years, so they're obviously good, but yeah, the originals had some issues. Nowadays, it's hardly ever mentioned and people just forget about it. I mastered Iron Tail without a tail. For some reason, out of nowhere, there's an adult joke in Poke Park Wii Pikachu's Adventure. Primeape says, "I mastered Iron Tail without a tail." Yeah, just a weird adult joke. I don't know how it got into this game. Really weird for Pokemon, especially a spin-off. Censored Pokemon cards. There's a lot of Pokemon cards that got censored over the years, and some of them seem fine, like say Gengar being in a cemetery, Pokemon Trainer accidentally flipping you off. I can't really see this one personally. And then gambling machines, which, okay, I guess that sort of makes sense. And then there's some that are super weird that, yeah, they make sense why they were banned, but why were they ever made? They have a card of Grimer looking under a girl's skirt, the Jinx cards that had their old blackface design, and for some reason, I'm not gonna fully show it because I don't even feel comfortable looking at it on this list, but there's a card where Misty is, not wearing enough, let's say. Really weird for the Pokemon Company to do. Anyways, weird entry to end the video on, but I hope you enjoyed. Have a great rest of your day, week, month, and I'll see you in the next one.